Hello there. Today, with some expert guidance from the tax advisors at Pro Tax Accountant, we're going to tackle a really important question for anyone living in the UK. How long can you really go without paying your council tax? Just imagine this for a second. You're moving into a new place, and the landlord pulls you aside and says, "Don't worry about council tax, mate. The house isn't even registered." Suddenly, a huge monthly bill just vanishes. Sounds a bit too good to be true, doesn't it?
And this is a real-life situation somebody actually faced. You can see how tempting that would be, right? You find a place to live, and one of your biggest outgoings just disappears. It really makes you wonder, what would happen if you just said, okay, fine, and went along with it? What are the odds you'd ever even get caught? But as that person probably suspected, an offer like that is absolutely swimming in red flags. It brings up a much bigger question. What is the real cost of a deal like this? And really, for any of us, how long can you actually go without paying before things start to get very, very serious? So to get to the bottom of it all, here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll cover the absolute basics, what council tax is and who's actually on the hook for it. Then we'll walk through what happens when you don't pay. We'll look at the council's powers, what support is out there if you're struggling, and finally, we'll bust some common and pretty dangerous myths. Okay, so to really understand why that landlord's offer is such a terrible idea, we have to get the fundamentals of council tax straight first. So what is it? Well, quite simply, council tax is what you pay your local council to fund all the services we kind of take for granted. You know, making sure the bins get collected, the streetlights actually work, the roads don't fall apart, and funding things like libraries and parks. It's basically the lifeblood for all those essential local services. Now, this right here is probably the single biggest misunderstanding about council tax, and it takes us straight back to that dodgy landlord. The myth is that the owner of the property pays the bill, but the reality? Nope. It is almost always the person or people actually living there, the occupants, who are legally responsible for paying. It's your name the council is looking for, not your landlord. So how much of a settling-in period do you get before you have to worry about this? The answer is 0. Not a single day. There is no grace period. Your legal responsibility to pay council tax kicks in the very day you move into a property. The clock starts ticking from moment 1. Right. So with that in mind, let's look at how this all plays out. What actually happens if you miss a payment? Well, the process is a lot faster and a lot more serious than most people think. Now, this is where things can spiral really, really fast, so you'll want to hear this part. If you miss just one payment, the council gives you about 2 weeks before sending a reminder. That reminder gives you just 7 days to pay up. If you miss that deadline or if you miss another payment later on, things get serious. You'll get what's called a final notice, and this is the absolute kicker. You lose the right to pay in installments. All of a sudden, the entire bill for the whole rest of the year is due, right then and there. And if you can't pay that full amount, you could have a court summons in your hands just a few weeks later. And that court summons is the council's first major step. They're not just trying to scare you, they're trying to get a powerful legal tool called a liability order. This is the key that unlocks all of their most serious powers. So what on earth is a liability order? Well, think of it like this. It's a ruling from a magistrate's court that officially confirms you owe the money. It doesn't give you a criminal record or anything like that, but it does give the council the legal green light to use much stronger methods to get that money back from you. And what can they do with it? Well, quite a lot. Once they have that liability order, they can go straight to your employer and take the money from your wages before it even hits your bank account. They can take deductions from benefits like universal credit. They can instruct enforcement agents, who we all know as bailiffs, to visit your home. And for really big debts, they can even secure the debt against your home with something called a charging order, or even push for bankruptcy. Now, the idea of bailiffs turning up is genuinely frightening, so it's good to know how it actually works. They can't just show up out of the blue. By law, they have to send you a notice of enforcement letter first, which gives you at least 7 clear days warning. When they do visit, their first step is usually to take control of goods. This often just means they make a list of your valuable items in an agreement, which you then promise not to get rid of while you pay off the debt. It's only if that fails that they can actually come back to remove those items to be sold. Okay, that was definitely the heavy part of the conversation. But what if you're not trying to dodge the system? What if you genuinely cannot afford to pay? Let's talk about the solutions, because there is help out there. This is the reality for millions of people, especially with the cost of everything going up. The letters are coming in, the debt is getting bigger, but you just do not have the money. So what on earth do you do then? Here is the pro tip, and it's the same advice you'll get from every debt charity and tax expert in the country. Communicate and do it immediately. Picking up the phone and talking to your counsel is the single most important, most effective thing you can do. They don't know you're struggling unless you tell them. They can often set up a payment plan that you can actually afford. Plus, you might be eligible for help you didn't even know existed, like a council tax reduction if you're on a low income, a 25% discount for living alone, or other reductions for students or carers. The absolute worst thing you can do is bury your head in the sand. And this story from Citizens Advice shows just how easily things can go wrong. Michael was dyslexic and was getting support with his council tax. When he moved house, he just assumed that support would automatically transfer over with him. Nobody told him he had to reapply. By the time anyone realized, he'd built up arrears of nearly £2,000 and was facing legal action. He wasn't refusing to pay. It was a simple, honest misunderstanding that just snowballed. That's why being proactive is so crucial. Right then, let's move on and clear up some really common and really dangerous myths. There's so much bad information floating around about council tax, and believing it can land you in a world of trouble. Okay, first up is the 6-year myth. A lot of people believe that council tax debt just goes away after 6 years, like some other types of debt. This is 100% false. Once a council gets a liability order for that debt, it never expires. They can chase you for it for years, even decades. It will not just disappear. Oh, this one catches so many people out. Let's say you're getting that 25% discount for living alone. If you take in a lodger, or even just have a friend come to stay with you long term, you are legally required to inform the council. You'll lose that discount. If you don't tell them and they find out, you could be hit with a bill for all the backdated discount, plus a fine that could be up to £1,000. And now we come to the ultimate question, the one thing that really worries people. Can you actually be sent to prison for not paying your council tax? Let's look at the actual official data. The simple answer is yes, technically it is possible. But in reality, it is incredibly rare. You can see from the numbers here that we're talking about just a handful of cases each year across the whole of England. It is an absolute last resort, and it's only used when a court decides someone is guilty of willful refusal or culpable neglect, which basically just means they believe the person could pay but is deliberately choosing not to. It is not for people who genuinely can't afford it. So if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's that council tax is what's known as a priority debt. The consequences of not paying are just so much more severe than for things like a credit card bill. So the question isn't really how long can I get away with not paying? It's why would I ever risk it? If you're struggling, please remember that doing nothing is the only thing that's guaranteed to make it worse. And just before we finish, the important disclaimer, this has been general guidance prepared by the team at Pro Tax Accountant, and you shouldn't rely on it alone for your financial decisions. For expert advice that's tailored to your specific situation, it's always best to talk to a professional. You can reach Pro Tax Accountant by phone or WhatsApp on 07985689912, or you can email them at info@protaxaccountant.co.uk. For a more detailed look, you can also read the full article on their blog. Thanks so much for your time, and if you found this useful, please do subscribe for more.